Hey folks, my name is Cyrus Davis. Welcome back. I've made a video in a while, but I have been prepping for post-rotation. And we are going to start off today with a post-rotation video just discussing all of the cards that are leaving the standard format. We're at least going to be discussing the ones that have day 2 to major since the last rotation. So a lot of these cards have been relevant for a while, or at least they're not relevant currently, and some of these cards have only just started to be relevant recently. But either way, we're going to sort of talk about all the cards that have made an impact on our last standard format, the Billion Stars on format, and say goodbye to some of the ones that are leaving here. We have a lot of cards to get through, so let's go ahead and just get right into it. Starting off, we have good old Aerodactyl V-Star. So Aerodactyl V-Star card, I'm not really going to miss much. The Ancient Star V-Star power has mostly been used as a Lugia counter. Just being able to shut off Summoning Star if Ancient Star comes into play first. Without Lugia V-Star in the format, Ancient Star really does not have much of a purpose. Loft Dive was always an okay attack, but not anything to write home about. So Aerodactyl V-Star, an interesting card that has seen definitely saw its fair share of success, but not a big miss there. Aerodactyl V similarly not really making much of an impact here, but there was actually, I included on this list because there was one Iron Thorn DX list from a few events ago that played one of Aerodactyl V, Fighting Energy, and Cornerstone Ogerpons, and was only playing Aerodactyl V to use Rock Crush, presumably, maybe Bite as well, but they did not play Aerodactyl V-Star. I don't think we're going to miss this, especially without Double Turbo Energy in format, but worth mentioning that it did make a mark on the scene this format without even having the Aerodactyl V-Star in the deck. Next we have Alolan Vulpix V-Star. So this is a card that I have day 2 to regional with in a Lost Box variant. And a pretty interesting card. I mean, we have Silvery Snowstar, does 70 damage for each your opponent's Pokemon V in play. Obviously, that's not going to be such a powerful effect anymore, but it was a great attack for killing big Pokemon against V-heavy decks. And Snow Barrage does 160, and then Vulpix cannot be damaged by Pokemon with abilities on the opponent's next turn. Now, this has been pretty much all but replaced by Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon EX. Alolan Vulpix V-Star, of course, has had lots of success, whether in control variants or with Arceus in the past. But I think it's pretty much been phased out now by Cornerstone, and we aren't going to miss it too much. Then we have Arceus V-Star. So Arceus V-Star is, as unsuccessful it has ever been currently, is in the worst position it's ever been in. However, it's still managing to, day 2 of Major here and there. It was in day 2 of Vancouver with Armarouge. And honestly, Armarouge continues to be a relatively solid deck with a good slew of options. So we might, Arceus V-Star, I imagine we'd see this card still popping up here and there and seeing success if it were to continue being in the format. However, it is going to be gone, so say goodbye to Arceus V-Star. A lot of Arceus V-Star fans out there. It's finally time to say goodbye, and we must move on from the Arceus V-Star era. Next, we have Archeops, so of course, this going hand in hand with Lugia V-Star. Just the end of a deck that has been really one of the best decks in the format since its release. Lugia V-Star was released as an S-tier deck, and it is still probably tier 1, maybe tier 2, and has really never slipped below tier 2. There may have been a couple events here or there where it wasn't as good of a play, but the deck has always been on the radar. It's never, I don't know if it's missed the day 2 at a major event since its release. So Lugia V-Star, one of the greatest decks of all time, will go down in history as one of the greatest decks of all time, possibly the original Lugia, possibly the greatest deck of all time. Yeah, there's not much more to say. Archeops and Lugia will be missed. This deck would still be very powerful if it were remaining in format. But we finally get to say goodbye to Summoning Star Primal Turbo and move on to bigger, better things. Next, we have the Articuno from Silver Tempest. This only has one major event result in this past Billion Stars on format, and it was in a Palkia Terapagos deck, I guess just as a way to do a little bit of damage, paralyze, then finish off your opponent's Pokemon next turn. So not going to be a huge miss, but this card, it has seen a lot of success over the past couple of formats. I actually played this in the same deck that I played the Alolan Vulpix V-Star in. And Wild Freeze is a deck that has won me a lot of games, won a lot of people a lot of games, and would still be an interesting option in Water-type decks going forward. Paralysis is really strong. This is definitely a card that, like, you might randomly, you might be building a Water deck, and you might randomly think of this card and be like, oh, I should put that in there, and then realize, oh, it rotated. Next, you have the Puppet Offering Banette, so obviously not a huge loss, but this card has been obviously a staple in any Banette-based deck, Banette EX-based deck. And Banette EX will be sticking around, so that's one less option that deck has if you'll want to continue to play it, even though it has fallen off a lot since the release of Purdue. But also, towards the tail end of this card's existence, it has been seeing play in our Child on EX as well, just a consistent way to get supporters back. So, definitely a card that, would continue to maybe be experimented with a little bit more if it were remaining in format. However, it is time for Banette to go. Probably not something we'll miss too much, but definitely something that probably would continue to have a spot somewhere if it were to remain in format. Next, we have the Magnetic Lift Beldum. So, Metang, not looking like it's in the best shape with the rotation of Dialga next format anyways, and most Metang builds have switched to the 70 HP Beldum at this point anyways, but we will always have the Beldum with Magnetic Lift that Andrew Hedrick used in his original Dialga build when he won Indianapolis Regionals. So, still a good shutout. 60 HP Beldum. Magnetic Lift was a great attack, and it will be missed. Next, Barrel. So, Barrel, another card that has seen less and less play as time has gone on, but is still it's still out there. It's still day-2ing events. Barrel is a stable consistency card. Abilities like it have always been powerful. I can't recall a version of this ability on stage 1 at least that wasn't a playable card. So this card will most certainly be missed. I'm sure it already is missed, especially since we still have Fan Rotom in the format, and that is so powerful post-rotation. One less option for having consistent draw over the course of the format, and just one of many, many consistency options that we lose going into post-rotation. Next, we have Bouffalant. So this is a powerful control option that we lose. Without double turbo energy, it would be a lot less powerful anyways. However, just worth noting that we won't have access to this Bouffalant. It is a decent win condition into a lot of things that have limited counts of specific basic energies. We can loss on some of those energy, especially with the combined with the newer Bouffalant that will be remaining in format that could reduce damage done to this one. Bouffalant has definitely it's had its fair share of success in Pidgeot control builds. It probably still could see a use here or there if it were still in format. So definitely a card that we need to keep note of not having access to as we are building, especially building control variants, which have been gutted, as we'll see through a lot of these options here. Next we have Cobalion, which has always been a great Charizard tech for getting up to that Charizard EX 330 damage for a lot of decks. Most recently was played, had quite a few day 2s in Cloth for allowing Hisuian Electrode with Binding Mochi to take a knockout on Charizard instead of needing super effective glasses. So Cobalion, definitely a card that will be missed, especially with Charizard EX still in format. This is a card that pretty much, a card like this is always going to have some sort of tech relevance for specific matchups, as long as the type that it is boosting your damage against is relevant on a high HP Pokemon. So Cobalion is definitely something that, we will need to make sure that we remember is not in format as we are trying to cook our post-creation deck lists and want to improve our Charizard matchup. Next, we have Comfey, and of course, goes along with that, we have Cramorant. We'll have some other Lost Box cards that I'll breeze through later, but losing the entire Lost Zone deck, really not much to say. We won't really feel necessarily the direct impact of this, but it will be just worth noting that we do not have access to the Lost Zone engine in general right now. This is just a whole deck that is going to be wiped off the face of the planet. Comfey and Cramorant, both cards that maybe have seen a little bit of play outside of the Lost Zone engine, but really, that's all they're going to be remembered for, is their spot in the Lost Box deck, and we will no longer have that sticking around. Next, we have Cresselia. So, a card that has seen quite a bit of play in Gardevoir in general, but especially recently has been a really good tech for the Dragapult matchup and sometimes the mirror. So losing this Cresselia, Gardevoir is taking several other hits, and Dragapult is still one of the best decks in the format. Definitely a tight loss for Gardevoir. I mean, will definitely make that Dragapult matchup much shakier. Darkrai V-Star. So Darkrai V-Star never been a crazy successful card, but did top deck a regional as an attacking like Darkrai V-Star base deck. More notably, has been played as like a thin line in Roaring Moon. I think they're as recently as Vancouver Regionals, I think there was a Roaring Moon list that played a 1/1 Darkrai V-Star in it, just for recovering powerful items like Dark Patches and Gusts, your Ace Spec, whichever one that might be in your specific list. But basically, Darkrai V-Star just allowing Roaring Moon to have a lot more mid to late game consistency and powerful options. Sometimes if you're getting it set up turn 2, even just allowing you to get like extra Dark Patches, energy switches, even to set up like a Moonlight Shuriken on Greninja. So Darkrai V-Star definitely, if especially with Moon losing so many other things, this will be one more option that Moon no longer has access to. Delphox V going. So this is one of a few cards that losing makes Gouging Fire basically unplayable. Delphox V's option to take 2 prize cards really quickly was pretty valuable to making Gouging Fire at least like a viable archetype. Also, huge loss for any Armarouge base deck. Again, just having that bench snipe option was a really powerful option that made the deck feel much more viable. And without having that sort of flexibility, that attacking option, those decks are all suddenly a lot more, significantly more linear, have a lot less going on, and lose a very powerful option for their single prize matchups. Next, we have this Diancie that, as long as it's in the active spot, prevents supporters done to your bench Pokemon, so it's protecting Pokemon from boss's orders. Not a card that has seen a ton of play, but it was played in numerous control decks for protecting Pokemon on the bench that you were setting up, in Snorlax decks, and Pidgeot control lists, and other miscellaneous control decks. So this will be an interesting control option that is worth noting is missed. Just the ability to protect your bench while drawing some cards with Spike Trot at the same time is definitely a cool option, even if it really never saw like a ridiculous amount of success. Next, we have the Sudden Transformation Ditto from Pokemon Go. Now, this is another card that has been played in a slew of control archetypes for copying a bunch of different control attackers with one Pokemon, and most recently has been played in these sort of poison Terapagos decks, whether with Cloth or without Cloth, to copy Badoo in particular, so that you can go ahead and Binding Mochi this, poison it with Toxic Powder, and copy Itchy Pollen without having the Thrail 30 HP, being able to survive a couple more poison ticks. And also, if you need to, switch into copying something like Cloth or any other attackers that you might include in your list that are non-rule box. But primarily Badoo. Have been seeing a lot more play recently with that Badoo combo. And so that we just sort of like this is an interesting option in a lot of decks. But we probably will not feel this being missed much at all, especially with Radiant Sweet and Sneasler also rotating, meaning that those sort of Badoo decks are probably a thing of the past. At least the dedicated like poison Badoo decks. Next, we have Drapion V, obviously most known for killing VMAX, which it hasn't been able to do in a long time. However, in the past season, it has seen lots of play still in Lugia builds, as an easy way to knock out Gardevoir EX. Of course, with Lugia rotating, that is no longer super relevant, but if some other deck pops up that can set up for colorless energy on a Drapion easily to have an easier time to knock out Gardevoir, it will be relevant that that is no longer an attacking option you have. You have to find some other Gardevoir counter in those builds. Of course, we have the Perplex Duskull rotating. None of the rest of the Dusknoir line is rotating. It's pretty easy to just switch over to the other Duskull. But Perplex, if you are playing a Dusknoir build that can use Perplex, is the better attack. Being able to confuse your opponent is definitely relevant, and can slow them down a little bit. If you're in a position where you have to be using Perplex, it's safe to say that you could benefit from your opponent's action when being confused. So, it's a notable loss, but one that we really won't notice much at all. Entei, another powerful option for Fire-type decks, mostly for Gouging Fire, that we are losing. Also, there have been a lot of dedicated Entei decks that people have played around with, not in, pretty recent memory, in combination with Teal Mask, Ogerpon. So, losing Entei definitely could be an interesting loss. I mean, it would a card that you could see play in Terror Box, stuff like that. Still, if it were in format, but of course we are losing this easy fire type attacking option. And I'm glad that it got to shine a little bit more in Gouging Fire toward the tail end of its the format, because it really did feel like Suicune and Raikou got most of the love over the course of their release. And Entei, maybe sort of towards the later half ended up picking up the pace a little bit. Next, we have the optimal Feebas is rotating, so you'll have to pick a new Feebas to use. Ascension, auto-evolving right into Melodic EX is huge for walls. Decent for the regular Melodic, but mostly this is relevant in walls. And not having access to that easy evolve means that your Feebas are much more vulnerable with their 30 HP against things like Phantom Dive if you can't evolve them quickly with Evo TM. Next, we have this Glade, which another card that hasn't seen a ton of play, but it has seen its way in and out of some players' Gardevoir lists for just that buddy catch option. Evolve Curly, and then just have the buddy catch to search for Sporters, and a pretty decent single prize attacker. Not a phenomenal Gardevoir card, but plenty of day twos with this thing. Gardevoir has definitely enjoyed making use out of Glade when it has been included in the list. Next, we have this Gengar that allows it to put itself from the discard pile onto the bench and then put 3 damage counters on itself. So, obviously, most notably, this card was used with Hisuian Zoroark V-Star to boost that guy's damage. And Hisuian Zoroark V-Star really has not been a relevant threat for a long time. However, this Gengar was actually playing Goldango in a build both at Vancouver Regionals and EUIC, just since you're already playing Psychic Energy as a Mimikyu counter, and then also to just put 3 damage counters on your board to move to your opponent's side of the board with Munkidori. So I actually thought that was really interesting that this card did manage to maybe see a little bit of an uptick near the very end of our format. We might even see this card day 2 again in Stockholm Regionals, which has not happened as of the time I'm recording this. So it's kind of interesting that people only just discovered maybe this Netherworld Gate plus Adrenabrain combo that potentially overlooked for a while. Next, we have Giratina V-Star. Of course, this has been recently most commonly copied with Regidrago V-Star, which is also rotating, but Lost Impact and Star Requiem have been some of the most powerful attacks in the format since Giratina's release. Lost Tina has, of course, always been super strong. I mean, it's definitely fallen off, especially since Regidrago V-Star originally released, even since just Dragapult DX released in general, but it still manages to keep popping up here and there, keep getting some smaller results, and it certainly will be missed. Many players' favorite deck, one of my favorite decks is a deck that I got a ton of points with last season, most of my Worlds Invite probably. So yeah, Giratina V-Star will definitely be missed, whether in Regidrago V-Star or as its own deck, or even for those Arctina enjoyers. Next, we have Gather the Crew Basculin. So, 0 energy attack lets you search for 2 basics. Not a card that's seen a ton of play, but it has seen play this format in some Dialga Metang lists, actually. Maybe not necessarily Prismatic Evolutions format, but a few sets ago. So, definitely a card that, has some value. I mean, I've seen other people play this card in random decks. Not this rotation, but in the Sword and Shield On format, who are playing this in the Zoroark box deck. So, Gather the Crew, a decent attack that, had its fair share of play. Not something that we'll really miss, but something to, show a little bit of respect to. I don't think people really even realize that this card ever made a day 2. So, it has more than you might think. Next, we have the Hisuian Electro V, which you probably remember most from being in Cloth lists as a way to one-shot Charizard EX. We talked about it with Cobalion earlier. Of course, Cloth is not really going to be a relevant deck anymore with that double turbo energy, but still worth noting that you do no longer have access to this Electrode V if you're playing some sort of poison deck and wanted to use that to one-shot Charizard EX. No longer on the table. Next, we have Hisuian Goodra V-Star. So, Rolling Iron, 200 and prevent and reduce damage done to itself by 80 on the next turn. Been a while since Goodra saw success on its own in either a Lost Zone deck or an Arceus deck. However, of course, has been seeing lots of play in Regidrago still as an attack to copy. Rolling Iron's very powerful attack, one that I did top 16 original with Arc Gudra. So I will miss it as well. I think that the card has been definitely been power crept out a little bit as a main attacker, but it was still fun to play it in Drago while it lasted. Next, we have a Zoroark Zoroark V-Star. A fun deck that has popped up here and there. It saw a bit of a resurgence when Area Zero came out. With Terapagos, gave you a new attacking option, more bench space for damaged Pokemon. But it did not, still wasn't enough to make the deck super viable. It's seen a couple of day 2s here and there, but never a major meta threat. Hisuian Zoroark V, on the other hand, actually has more day 2s than Hisuian Zoroark V-Star by quite a bit. That's because it's played in Cloth a little bit with Flutter Mane. You could use the Mochi on the Hisuian Zoroark or just get some extra poison in there and do a decent amount of damage, usually knocking out single price Pokemon, and then swapping into Flutter Mane to slow down your opponent further. This is mostly like a Lost Box tech. You just would avoid return for a knockout and then go into Flutter Mane. With Badoo, the release of Badoo, this has become pretty phased out, but worth noting that this card actually was day 2ing events in the Cloth Terapagos deck only a couple of months ago. Next, we have the Hoothoot from Astral Radiance, which only became a viable option with the release of Noctowl and Zard Crown. I haven't seen a ton of play, but it has seen play in some Zard Terapagos lists as a answer to the Crushing Hammers in Iron Thorns EX. So that is something that could definitely be interesting. If a Crushing Hammer deck does pop up coming up, obviously Noctowl is very, very powerful right now, so we'll no longer have that option to counter Crushing Hammers if that becomes relevant for Noctowl decks in the future. Next, we have Kirlia. Of course, is very relevant for Gardevoir EX. You no longer have your Stage 1 that allows you to just draw through your deck really quick. Means there's going to be more reliance on rare candy into your Gardevoirs since your Kirlias don't really do anything. A lot less focus on Evo TMing into a bunch of Kirlias turn 1. Or just getting a bunch of Kirlias out in general. It's no longer going to be the way the deck plays. You're not going to have a board that keeps you safe against Iono nearly as much. So it'll be interesting to see how Gardevoir EX adapts. It looks like people are still playing pretty similar builds and just rolling on more consistency cards for now. But we'll see how that pans out. Kirlia is going to be a pretty huge loss for Gardevoir. This card obviously is what really brought the deck together, honestly. Next, we have this Kyogre. Not a card that's seen a ton of play, but it has day 2 some majors in Chien-Pao. Just put 3 energy attached to this Pokemon into your hand, and then do 180 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. Chien-Pao EX is already losing a lot of options, namely Radiant Greninja and Irida, which are pretty much staples in the deck, Pokestop as well. So having one less option in this Kyogre, definitely a little bit of a loss, but Chien-Pao probably was not going to save Chien-Pao if it were still in format. Next, we have this Liepard, another card. Pretty rogue, but has seen play in some control builds, especially with the loss of Refinement and Bibarel as well. We're losing a lot of other Stage 1 draw, so this would be another Stage 1 draw option that, we could substitute one of those with if it weren't rotating. Of course, we still have the Hisuian Zoroark EX, or the Zoroark EX that has the same ability, but that is harder to not hard to get out, but it gives up an extra prize card, has a higher retreat cost, so not as good of a draw Pokemon. Liepard, definitely something that, could see more play. Would pretty much always be, like, a consideration when deck building. And anytime it's in format, it's just such a good ability in general. It's always going to be something that's relevant even if it's to a very low degree like it has been the past couple of formats. But now, Liepard finally gone, won't really ever get its chance to truly shine the way maybe it could have in a format without Kirlia or Bibarel. Lugia V-Star, I won't talk too much about Lugia V-Star because I pretty much already talked about this card's rotation in the Archeop section. Just to reiterate how powerful this card was, how iconic this card will forever be, and now we are over it. Lumineon V. So obviously Lumineon V is a huge loss. Lumineon V played in most decks pre-rotation. And honestly, I'm already in my post-rotation testing has been pretty rough playing without it. Most decks can function without Lumineon V. It's just sort of Lumineon V bails you out in those dead hand games so often. Or where you you don't find the boss in the right turn and stuff like that, which I think is fine as far as like making it more difficult to find boss late game. That forces players to build a little bit differently, forces players to find Iona at the right times, forces players to play a little bit, build their decks a little bit differently. I think that we are going to feel a massive impact really quickly in how many games are decided by bricks with the loss of Luminion, since that is something that allows you to have much more consistent early games. And if every deck gets much less consistent early games, then every deck is more likely to sort of have it at hand and get blown out of the water quickly by their opponent. That's why things like Luminion are typically pretty healthy for the format, in my opinion. Luxray AV, just another control card that we lose. Not something that we will feel the effects of too much, but it was always, pretty much has always been stable in Pidgeot control, always been a powerful option. Just one more thing that is gutted from the control package, one less way for you to whittle away your opponent's resources. Next, you have Metafy, which is a huge rotation. Namely, there aren't as many. We're losing like Delphox V and Radiant Greninja, which were big bench snipe attacks, but there are definitely more still post-rotation that we'll no longer be able to protect against, like Screamtail's Roaring Scream, or more importantly, and almost problematically early on in the format right now, it seems, Wellspring Mask Ogerpon EX's Torrential Pump. We've seen Terrabox shoot up to like possibly the best deck in the format based on, you can just always Torrential Pump, and there's really nothing your opponent can do to respect it. So the loss of Metafy is going to be pretty big for a while. We're not getting another bench barrier Pokemon until next set, I believe, or maybe even the set after. I think it's the next set. But it has 80 HP, the next one, and it's a Shaman, so you won't be able to Buddy Poffin for it, which is also going to be, which means that we're still going to be missing the Manaphy safety, even when that Shaman comes out, just because of that 10 extra HP making it not Buddy Poffin searchable. Mantine, so not a card we'll really notice the effects of very quickly, because this is mostly a card played with Snorlax for retreat locking. Retreat lock is just not as good of a game plan in general, even with the limited retreat lock options that are in format. So Born Ashore to get something trappable from your opponents to come out onto the bench has definitely been seeing some success lately. Has definitely always been a consideration in Snorlax builds, but really not something we're going to miss too much with rotation. Now, speaking of Retreat Lock, we have Mawile. Tempting Trap Mawile is going to be a pretty big loss, honestly. It's a pretty easy card to slip into certain decks to make a Retreat Locking a win condition without doing any damage, which is a problem with all of the corner Retreat Locking Pokemon in the current format. They all do at least 10-20 damage, which means you can't permanently lock something in the active. You will eventually knock them out. Whereas with Mawile, Tempting Trap, you could always just Tempting Trap and do 0 damage and lock your opponent forever. So it's definitely going to be something missed. It was the best retreat locker in the format, other than at the pre-rotation, Wellspring was better than Mawile, but without double turbo energy to reduce Wellspring's damage to 0, it won't be able to do the same thing it did pre-rotation, which means Mawile will be very greatly missed. Next, we have Minccino. Now, with the rotation of Lugia and Archeops, Minccino is not going to be really relevant anymore with its attack that doing 70 free special energy on it. However, I figured I'd still mention that if something comes out that does make Minccino viable again, we will no longer have the Call for Family Minccino to work with, and obviously that is, recently the 70 HP one has been pretty much always the choice because of Phantom Dive, but in general, having the option for Call for Family, it would still have been nice if Minccino does end up being good again. Next, we have this Moltres, which is another card that we haven't really seen do too much. It saw some play in Entei Valiant when that was originally doing really well. And then pretty recently, actually as recently as Fortaleza Regionals, which was the last event weekend, there were a couple players playing this in Gouging Fire, just have an easy single price stacker off of Mega Basin, because Moltres has great Mega Basin synergy. So if any fire deck not having this will be missed a little bit, we are also losing Mega Basin, so you wouldn't really be able to activate it well. Anyways, next we have the Oranguru V that has famously been what has made Cloth extra good. Now we're losing Force Seal Stone as well, which is what really makes a Rangaroo powerful. So we won't miss a Rangaroo too much with, we'll be too busy missing Force Seal Stone. However, it is worth noting that, because of the loss of Rangaroo V, those sort of like heavy tool-based decks won't have that strong option, and that Forest Seal Stone for Precious Trolley turn 1 combo will not be something that can be replicated in future formats. Next, we have Dialga V-Star, a card that we probably miss playing in Archaludon. It could definitely still be relevant in Archaludon if the card wasn't rotating. And, it has been served its purpose pretty well in Archaludon as far as the Evolutions format goes, at least, winning a Champions League and having multiple top 8s. So Dialga, definitely a card that will be missed. But not a card that didn't get its fair chance to shine. We got to see it in Archaludon. We got to see it win a regionals on its own as Dialga Matang. And we got to see it even before that have some success with like Lost Zone engines, or just like Metal Patch. I think it was just called Metal Patch when that was in format. So Dialga has been a card that's been around. It's seen its day, and I don't think people will miss it too much when it's gone. But definitely something that Archaludon may wish it had at times still. Next, we have Origin Form, Palkia V-Star, a deck close to my heart, as I top 16, specifically bubbled out of top 8 at 9th with it at Worlds in 2023, and now it is finally time to say goodbye. I love Origin Form Palkia V-Star. Both Palkia Terapagos and Palkia Dusknoir are still like decently relevant decks that pop up here and there. And it will be sad to see Palkia go in what has been was a very, very dominant deck on release, and then sort of became less dominant over time, but has managed to always maintain some relevance, especially with the Radiant Greninja. Next, we have Pidgeot V, which I actually day-2'd Toronto with fairly recently, in combination with the Enriching Energy to draw 4 cards Enriching Energy and then shuffle it back in. It's been a decent Snorlax card in general with Forest Seal Stone, allowing you to enable Forest Seal Stone, or even just another like Lost Zone decks have done the same thing. Enable Forest Seal Stone, use it, and then shuffle it back in, so you don't have to keep 2 prize Pokemon in play. So Pidgeot V, something that, if you're wanting to play some sort of Enriching Energy loop deck, could be missed, but otherwise with the loss of Forest Seal Stone, not really something that we'll think about too much. Next, we have Radiant Alakazam. So this will be huge for Dragapult EX specifically. Obviously, this card was pretty much staple in Dragapult EX for a while. There were some points where we were playing Radiant Charizard maybe instead, but Radiant Alakazam has pretty much always been the more popular one, and recently has been the only one really. This card will be very, very much so missed. I won an IC with this as my Radiant of choice. Painful Spoon, just an incredibly powerful ability, allows for a lot of more complicated plays with these damage spread decks, a lot more powerful plays with these damage spread decks, especially in combination with things like Turo to reuse it. And honestly, recently has been pulling its weight almost more than Radiant Greninja. It's been obviously the Radiant of choice in Dragapult decks, and it's also, I've day-2'd Vancouver in a Gardevoir list recently. So we've seen this card, and it's been seeing play in Regidrago V-Star as well. So Radiant Alakazam has only gotten honestly better as time has gone on, and it seems like it's sort of at its peak right now, right before it rotates. But honestly, Eve probably will always be my favorite ace spec, even over Radiant or my favorite Radiant, even over Greninja. But of course, we do have Radiant Charizard, the other of the big 3 Radiant Pokemon. This is a card that hasn't been seeing as much play lately because Charizard has been on the downtick, and so has Lost Box. But Lost Zone Charizard was my most played deck, I think, of last format. And Charizard EX, of course, loves to use this card. It's a game changer for Charizard EX. Allows you to prize map completely differently. It's enabled lots of Pidgeot controls to play this as a powerful attacker. Really, any fire deck has been able to have this huge body for late game that just attacks for such low energy for such big damage. And this is going to be a card that's definitely missed. I mean, Charizard lists post rotation immediately would still love to be playing this. So huge loss for really any fire type deck going into post rotation. Radiant Gardevoir, not really a card that we will miss because it just reduces damage done to your Pokemon by Vs, and we will no longer have Vs. Hasn't been seen play in a while because Vs become less and less popular, but most notably, recently saw play in some Regidrago lists when Regidrago first released as a mirror tech to prevent lost impact from knocking out other Regidrago V-Stars. So Radiant Gardevoir, definitely a card that has seen its fair share of success, and even some pretty recent success. And we won't really miss it post rotation because of it is only a V counter, but it did definitely put in the work while it was around. Now, Radiant Greninja, definitely one of the most missed cards of the rotation. Concealed cards is just incredibly powerful. Moonlight Shuriken is ridiculously strong attack. This card, both just for the ability or just for the attack, has been a very incredible option in many decks. It is probably still, even with Alakazam being so much more popular now, I think Radiant Greninja is definitely still the most popular Radiant as far as all decks go. So many decks are going to miss this a lot. I mean, Raging Bolt's going to miss it a ton. Goldango is going to miss it a ton. There's a lot of decks that are like downright reliant on Radiant Greninja, even non-water decks. And obviously, decks that were abusing Moonlight Shuriken a lot, like Chen Pao, are going to feel this rotation even more so. But honestly, every deck that plays a good amount of basic energy is going to miss at least having the option to include a Radiant Greninja. Possibly one of the best cards, like definitely maybe top 3 cards of all time. Radiant Jirachi, when this Pokemon is knocked out, by damage from your opponent's attacks, search your deck up for up to 3 cards and put them in your hand and shuffle your deck. And then, of course, Astral Misfortune for 2 colorless, flip 2 coins, both of them are heads, your opponent's active opponent is knocked out. So this has been a cheeky way to take big knockouts randomly on a double coin flip, while having just a wall in the active that, can immediately set up your board if your opponent knocks it out. This actually, I think, Tord Rekla actually played this in Pidgeot Control not that long ago, and that is how the card made this list. But honestly, I mean, not really a loss that we're going to actually feel that much. Radiant Heatran, so this is a card that we won't really notice the loss of either with the rotation of Magma Basin, but of course, Magma Basin, Radiant Heatran, and Armarouge have had a lot of synergy. This has been the Radiant of choice in most Armarouge builds in the past, so it'll be interesting to see how they adapt without this big single prize attacker, not having Charizard as a substitute either. So it's not a card we'll really miss, but definitely a card that if we had Mega Basin still in the format could still be pretty powerful, and has definitely seen its fair share of play, even if it was never one of the big popular Radiants. Next, we have Radiant Hisuian and Sneasler, which of course has really shined in the Cloth Terapagos build recently, allowing you to boost your poison damage up to take key knockouts, as well as get more donks with the Baby Petrunt. It will be, if you do want to play that poison package, it will be significantly worse now. You'll have to play things like the Stadium that boosts damage by 20 instead to sort of get those math fixes. And it's just significantly worse. Like, the poison package just really is. I'm sure some people will try to make it work in some stuff still, but without the Sneasler, that free extra 20 damage is so big. I mean, 20 damage goes a really long way. And I can overstate how much the Sneasler would be missed. I think that if Sneasler was still in format, I mean, the poison package probably would still be good somewhere, but without it, I really don't see a home for any of the poison cards anymore. Next, we have Radiant Serena. Definitely not the most popular Radiant, but, saw some play in Lugia at one point for just healing the entire board against certain spread attacks. And we are going to see, we actually saw, I believe, the top 8 Pidgeot Control at Vancouver played Radiant Serena to help heal up your board, keep your board healthy against Adrenabrains, Phantom Dives, stuff like that. So seeing Radiant Serena leave right after making probably its only major event top 8, at least outside of the Lugia build that was using it to have a better Lost Box matchup into Lost Mine. It's interesting. We saw this card just popping up late this format. We could still see this card be decent next format if it were still in format to heal up against Phantom Dives and Degenerabrains, but no longer an option. The card didn't really get to ever shine too much, but at least it got a major event top 8 right before its rotation. Next we have Raichu V. So obviously this is going to be a big loss for Miraidon. This was your easiest and best way to take big one-shots late in the game, or at any point in the game really. So we'll no longer have that way to take those easy one-hit knockouts on things like Dragapult or Charizard. And that's going to be really problematic for Miraidon not having that option anymore. Your damage cap is going to be much lower. I don't think there's a really good substitute for Raichu at all to take easy one-shots. So this is going to be a huge loss for any Miraidon players. And speaking of huge loss for any Miraidon players, Raikou V, of course, other places, any lightning deck, Raikou V was pretty solid into with its one retreat, great ability, and great attack. But the big loser with Raikou V is, of course, going to be Miraidon, which will not only be losing its one-shot potential attacker, but also its 2 energy attacker, which was your most consistent way to get those early game attacks on little Pokemon, but you didn't need to be going for a whole Miraidon or Iron Hands attack. Losing a little bit of extra draw, of course, we're losing Forest Seal Stone anyways, but Miraidon just about to get a lot less consistent in the early game without this. Next, we have the results from Astral Radiance, which of course has been the most popular one since Gardevoir released. And then we also have the Memory Skip results. So we're losing our 2 best results options, realistically. Side Shot's still good because it has 70 HP, and that is the one that we will, of course, be playing now. But it does a little bit of a bummer to lose the optimal results and then also lose Memory Skip one at the same time. Realistically, the Side Shot one is still pretty solid, and we really won't miss the Ralts rotation all that much. Of course, Regidrago V-Star. If you like Regidrago V-Star, you're going to miss him. If you don't, you can celebrate with the rest of us. Regidrago V-Star has been a pretty dominant deck ever since Kyurem released. Saw a little bit of play with as soon as Steel Mask Ogerpon was released and it was able to be set up with energy switches. And of course, did see some play in RCS builds a little bit before that. But really, nothing compares to the menace that it has been since Kyurem's release. Of course, it's finally died down a little bit now, but it's still running rampant here and there. There's still players making day 2s with it. And to me, that is unacceptable. I will be happy to see it gone very soon. So that's all I really say about Regidrago V-Star. I think it's a cool deck. I like. I don't hate playing it. I think it's just a little bit gimmicky sometimes. I think it definitely prevents your opponent from playing the game a little bit too often for me to really enjoy it. But it was decks that copy a bunch of different attacks and sort of make a toolbox out of one attacker are always going to be pretty cool. Regidrago V-Star definitely, I am glad that it got to have its success in the format, even if it did end up being maybe a little bit too good towards the tail end of its time in the game. Next, we have this Regice, which is, of course, the optimal Regice currently for the Regigigas deck, which is rotating as a whole, so I won't talk too much about Regice, but we are losing the Regis. Regis have been pretty much a dead deck for a while now, but they still popped up a little bit recently with the release of Treacherous Trolley and Pikachu EX, so with the rotation, this deck will finally be completely gone. Now, I will touch on this Regidrago, because Dragon's Horde is actually being used outside of the Regis deck a little bit, as a way to just draw some extra cards and then retreat it, especially with the release of Latias EX and the massive bench of Cloth Terapagos. This was an option that people played a little bit in Cloth. You just bring it out at the start of your turn, drop to 4, then free retreat into something else. So Regidrago, definitely something that would probably still see play if it weren't rotating. Will be missed a little bit. And then Regilucky, same deal. Another Regi that, of course, we're losing as part of the Regi package, but also a card that has seen a good amount of play outside of the Regi package in control builds for recovering trainer cards. This is something that is definitely going to be missed for any control deck. Just another powerful control option that allows you to infinitely get back resources that will be missed if you are a control player. This is certainly a card that you would still be considering in any control list if it were still in format. So. Next, we have Regilucky VMAX. Never a super powerful card, but it does have a major event day 2 in Miraidon, boosting your damage by 30, having a big body in Regilucky VMAX as a solid attacker as free retreat. So definitely something that, especially with how many options that Miraidon is losing, may have been maybe a way to keep Miraidon working, but we aren't going to have that option either. Another powerful Miraidon card that we are losing, even if this one maybe never really saw mainstream success. Now, of course, the Regigigas from the Regi's deck that we are having to say goodbye to. We have Regigigas V-Star, which did see a decent amount of play in Arceus builds for a while, just as a Pokemon that you could power up to do a clean 230 really easy. There's a lot of Pokemon that can't quite be knocked out by Trinity Nova, that can be knocked out by Giga Impact. So this was a pretty big attacker to have access to for Arceus builds for a while. Not something that really sees play currently, and not something that we'll really miss much, but it was definitely an interesting thing to have around the format. Of course, that V-Star power is also really cool and interesting, and although probably has not been used absurd amount of times, is very interesting and powerful when you do pull it off. And that we have seen our last Star Guardian most likely at this point. So time to say goodbye to the option of Regigigas V-Star. So the Regirock from Regi's and the Registeel from Regi's, I'll brush right over those. Of course, Rotom V, massive loss. I mean, Instant Charge has been such a massive part of Rare Candy decks since it's, really since Arven. Since the Arven Stone combo was released, or at least discovered, and Rotom V with Arven and Stone has been staple in most Rare Candy decks ever since, just for that extra, you're not really doing anything turn 1, you might as well draw a few cards and set yourself up for a powerful turn 2 and easy Rare Candy. Rare Candy decks are definitely going to suffer from this. You're going to have to lean a lot more on Badoo, which is going to be very problematic if you're going first. Going first is a Stage 2 deck now has become even more risky. And it's now going to be significantly more difficult for you to pull off like turn 2 Rare Candy plays. And of course, control decks that might not be trying to attack every turn, or just early game in general, are also going to miss having this extra draw over the course of the game. Rotom going to be a huge loss for a lot of decks. Really, any setup deck. The Sableye from the Lost Zone package, already sort of talked about that. We're saying goodbye to Lost Zone. Not too much to say about Sableye specifically. The Shaman V has been around a little bit in like Lost Zone builds for as a Charizard EX counter. It could be used in things like these Terror Box decks with Crispin as a Charizard EX knockout too. So definitely something that, not a huge loss, not something you'll probably think about missing too much, but an option that could still be good as a Charizard EX counter if it were lingering around, that we will be losing access to. We have the Slowbro with Twilight Inspiration. You can stack only if your opponent has exactly 1 prize card remaining. Take 2 prize cards. Just an easy way to take your last 2 prize cards. Never saw a ton of play, but it did in some like attacking Pidgeot Ox decks, sort of that are styled sort of like Pidgeot Control, but with more attacking options. This card actually did see play this format and did take to a major. So that's how I made it on the list. I don't think it's very good. I think it's a card that, if it were still in format, it might be something that, comes up at some point. Day 2 is another major, the way it sort of surprised Day 2 to major this format, but definitely not a card that you will really miss much. Now, I know I will miss Snorlax from Pokemon Go, and I know that most of you probably will not. This is just, it's been the stall deck since it came out. Snorlax has been, I'm sure we'll get another Pokemon like it one day, but Snorlax, this has probably been maybe the most successful iteration of this ability ever. I mean, this ability has been reprinted a few times and has always seen some success, but I think that this might be the most successful variant of this ability that's ever been printed. Retreat Lock adds a lot to the game, in my opinion. It forces players to build their decks differently if they want to beat it. I think that it's a very fun deck to play against. Personally, I know most people are going to disagree with that. It's a hot take, but I think that it forces you to think outside of the box a little bit if you are playing a matchup where the matchup's at least winnable. Obviously, when you're playing a deck that just could not beat Snorlax, it's not great. But I think for most decks, there's some sort of lines that you can take, and it is interesting to try to think your way out of the sticky situation that Snorlax puts you in. It's also fun deck building for Snorlax. It's hard to answer everything. There's so many different cards that you can play in Snorlax. Personally, I'm going to miss playing Snorlax. I'm going to miss playtesting Snorlax. I'm going to miss building lists for Snorlax. And I hope that we get some sort of new... Yeah, I wouldn't miss Snorlax as much if there weren't if there were other control. It's definitely not my favorite control deck of all time. It's definitely more linear than most. And I can only hope that we get some maybe more interesting control decks in the future. Next, we have the Lost Origins Snorlax, which has not seen play in a while, but was always a decent option in Lugia and Lost Box decks, as just a solid 180 attacker that can't be hit by certain effects like Lost Mine. And, 3 energy from 180, just nothing to scoff at. Definitely hasn't seen as much play lately, but will definitely go down in history as a pretty strong card in general. Won't talk about this too much, but we are losing the optimal Togepi. I think Togekiss definitely still has a place next format, especially in potentially in Raging Bolt, which was I think where it's Raging Bolt and Goldango is where it's found the most success up to now, and I think that could continue to go into rotation if some of my predictions are right. But this Togepi will be rotating. This is the optimal Togepi, but only barely. It's not really going to be a significant change. Reader V, this will be a hit to any, obviously we're losing Lugia anyways, but this will still be a hit to any heavy Teal Mask based decks. There have been quite a few that have come out where it's just a heavy Teal Mask deck with a lot of grass energy, and then Wader ends up being a really nice late game option in those decks with all the energy that you flood onto the board. So we won't have that. That is definitely worth noting if you're trying to build something like that going into post rotation. Next, we have the Zamazenta. So this is mostly good in Dialga with Metang to set it up. Not really as good in our Chaladon, because our Chaladon usually would just rather set up itself. However, definitely a notable mention, especially with our Chaladon still being good. Notable that we will not have the single price option, even if a Metang deck ends up being reasonable again in the future. Next, we have Zamazenta V-Star. So this card, not very good, but it did debut a regional very recently in our Chaladon as a one-of, just to use the Shield Star to basically checkmate your opponent, put your opponent in a spot where they need to do 100 more damage to take a knockout on their next turn, so you can put them in a spot where they just, because of that extra 100 damage, they just cannot one-shot any of your put one in play. Basically gives you a free turn where your opponent's not going to take any prize cards. So it definitely was an interesting inclusion there. I think that honestly could be pretty decent in general still if it were remaining in the format. Could be a decent Archaladon option, especially for attacking for something like Pikachu EX maybe. But we are losing that option. I'm glad I got to see a little bit of success in Archaladon before it rotates. And then of course Zamazenta V, which also was played in that build. I mean, it has nice synergy with our Chaladon as well, allows you to ditch your hand and draw 5, which is really good early game with our Chaladon, since you're trying to get some energy in the discard pile. And then Revenge Blast allows you to do, if you set it up as our Chaladon, can do more damage in the late game than our Chaladon can, so it also gives you a late game attacking option. So this is also a pretty cool card to play in our Chaladon. And Regal Stance has honestly been a pretty decent ability in general. I think I played it in my Cerule Edge at one point, just to have that extra energy in the discard pile turn 1. Definitely an interesting card that never really got a chance to shine, but at least saw a little bit of success here and there. Next, we have Pokemon Go Zapdos. So of course it's going to be another huge dip for Miraidon or really any other Lightning deck. Just whenever you want to do, there are just going to be some times you would rather be doing 10 more damage, and not being able to have that Zapdos as an option in your deck for those times is definitely going to hurt for Lightning decks in general. Actually, I have one of a Rezu. Now, I don't think this is a very good card, but I think it's actually made the list because someone played in Lugia instead of Jacques, which obviously I don't agree with, because you want to be able to Jacques for Lugia V-Star if you need to. But someone did play this in Lugia V-Star to search out their Archeops and Chinshinos, so put some respect on a Rezu, I guess. We are losing losing Sharon's Care. So we are losing a lot of the biggest enablers for Sharon's Care, like Arceus and Pidgeot EX in Pidgeot control builds. However, Sharon's Care was still cool for picking up Blood Moon EX without losing any energy. It's been mostly completely phased out by Turo because of the versatility of Turo. But if you are looking to play a big normal type deck, even something like Slacking EX post rotation, this is definitely a card that you're going to miss. Cold's Experiment, of course, another part of that Lost Zone engine, but also just a good card in its own right. I know my group that I test with played this card in the Cornerstone Walls deck to Baltimore Regionals, and I had this in my Iron Thorns EX list for NAIC 2024. So Cold's Experiment, definitely a card that has been successful both in and out of Lost Box engines, and will definitely be missed. I think I also played one of these in my Snorlax list at Toronto. So Colress definitely would still be a very powerful draw card if it were sticking in format. It's just a great way to accumulate extra cards in your hand and thin your deck of some cards that you don't need. So, of course, we'll miss the Lost Box engine, but we'll also just miss Chorus in general. Now, Silene, another powerful control card that's going to be missed. Of course, it's seen a little bit of play outside of control, but it's primarily been this all recover whatever you want control card. And we no longer have that, so control, that's a huge loss for control options-wise. You can no longer, I don't even know if you have what your next best way to like infinite loop to keep from decking out is with the loss of Silene and Team Yell's Cheer. So it's going to be interesting to see if control does end up being good again anytime soon, how it will adapt to the loss of Silene. Cynthia's Ambition, another card that has not been great, but I mean, I played it to a regional. I think the card is solid. You can draw cards until you have 5 cards in your hand, or if any of your Pokemon were knocked out during your opponent's last turn, draw until you have 8 cards in your hand instead. Definitely a card that, you know, there's so many draw options right now that there's not really any need for it. I mean, even Hassel is definitely, is mostly better than Cynthia's Ambition. But I think the last time that it was played, and the reason it was able to still make this list, was NAC 2024. A couple of players played it as a one-of in Lost Box. So in those single prize decks, where you're getting knocked out a lot, this like sort of generic drop to 8 card definitely has a lot more value. And you know, there are definitely some decks that maybe would have wanted it if it were sticking around. Irida, going to be a massive loss for any water deck. I mean, it's just like, it would be like if you lost Arvin. Searching your deck for a water Pokemon and an item is just such a massive early game consistency boost. Searching your deck for an item is so huge. Searching your deck for a water Pokemon, especially when Greninja format, was so huge. And all water decks are going to be worse for not having this card. Similar to Dragapult decks losing Lance, I think that it won't be too massive a hit, but it definitely decreases Dragapult's consistency pretty significantly, especially with the loss of Lumineon. So you just don't have as many good consistency options in general. So also losing Lance, which was becoming like a 3, maybe even 4 of in your Dragapult builds. Dragapult is going to have to find new options quick, and they're definitely not going to be as good at getting used to that really quickly. So there's your Fortune Sisters. So just another control loss. We no longer like target down our opponent's items in deck, which means you know, all of those items will be safe until they are drawn, which is pretty bad for control, honestly. I mean, there are certain cards, like switching cards, that might win your opponent the game on the spot by breaking lock, that you would really be like to be able to hunt down while they're still in the deck. So, Misfortune Sisters hasn't ever been, in Snorlax obviously been pretty essential. In Pidgeot control, it's been sort of a take it or leave it card, but it will definitely be missed either way. Roseanne's Backup, so of course been a great recovery card for multiple things that other cards have a tough time recovering. Now, the decks that this has been played in, I think, kind of fall off anyways. I mean, Lugia's gone. Pidgeot control is pretty weak now, seemingly at least. So, Roseanne's Backup definitely isn't going to miss too much, but was definitely a very, very, very strong card as long as it's in format, and definitely would still have a place, especially if some more important special energy get printed for the standard format in the future. Next, we have Roxanne. So this card that, you know, probably won't feel effective too much because, you know, it will mostly be able to be replaced with Iono. However, it was very powerful, and, you know, a lot of decks really don't like using Iono late game and really need to be using Roxanne instead if they want to play a disrupting card like Goldango. You know, really doesn't want to put its hand size small and then have to find off a low hand size on Iono, like superior energy retrieval to get a knockout. So decks like that are going to lose a crucial disruption card. But otherwise, most decks will be able to substitute this pretty well with Iono. Next, we have Serena, which isn't really going to be a loss at all. I saw some play in Lugia as like an extra supporter that discards some cards from your hand, while also being able to target down Vs as a Gust, so that it doubles as a Gust card for things like Rotom and Lumineon. With the rotation of all Vs anyways, of course, we're not going to miss Serena at all. And, of course, with the loss of Lugia, which was the only deck that had really been still playing Serena, even less so going to miss Serena at all. Next, you have Team Yell's Cheer, so just another recovery card being lost by control. Team Yell's Cheer, not really a card that saw play in anything else. They obviously Tord-plated in Charizard for a little bit as a control tech for a little bit, but for the most part, this has just been a control card for infinitely recycling your resources with Silenes, and definitely just going to be another big hit for control and making it more difficult for control to like exist as a deck in general. Now, Thornton has been great protection against early game snipe attacks like Wellspring Mask Ogerpon, Radiant Greninja, Phantom Dive, Kyurem. Now Kyurem and Radiant Greninja, not really a concern anymore, but Wellspring Mask Ogerpon EX definitely is. Phantom Dive definitely is. So no longer having Thornton as a way to get your stage 2 Pokemon out, or get whatever Pokemon out in a single turn, then evolve them immediately before they can be easily targeted down by some of these attacks, is definitely going to be a big loss for a lot of decks. I mean, Melodic gets a little bit worse as a tech card in some things. Pidgeot gets a little bit worse into like Dragapult when you can't Thornton the Pidgey into play, and the Rare Candy into the Pidgeot. And Thornton has been pretty decent in general for being able to swap your Pokemon around in interesting spots. I think Thornton's one of the coolest cards that I've gotten to use in a long time, and I will miss the interesting situations that it creates. Wind of Worker, another card that hasn't seen a ton of play lately, but I actually did Day 2 Toronto with this. It's just a generic draw 3 card in Snorlax that can get rid of some annoying stadiums. I think there aren't as many annoying stadiums to get rid of post-rotation, but I mean, not being able to get rid of Jamming Tower will still be annoying. I don't think this is like a phenomenal card. I think there's just so many better draw cards right now. But if there's a deck that really wants to get rid of a specific stadium, or they print some more annoying stadiums where you might want to draw 3 that discards the stadium, Work is definitely a card that could be missed, especially with the loss of Lost Vacuum being losing another way to get rid of stadium cards. One of Canceling Clone, so this is going to be a huge miss for a lot of decks. Obviously, not needed for Manaphy anymore, so not really worried about that. In a lot of the decks that would have been trying to get around Manaphy are gone anyways, but the second most popular use of Canceling Clone has been wall breaking against things like Cornerstone and Milotic, and Mimikyu, and those cards get to run rampant now. Walls is one of those best decks post-rotation, and Canceling Clone is nowhere in sight to be answering it. So decks have to find way more creative ways around the walls in the walls deck now. You can't just throw in a couple Cologne and take a couple easy knockouts and call it a day. Now you have to actually fit in an attacker that can deal with them effectively, even while they're putting up a good pace of damage, and realistically usually the energy for it. I mean, Terrabox has to play both Cornerstone and Fighting Energy, takes up 2 pretty valuable spots in the deck on a card that they don't really want to be playing otherwise, whereas they could just play Canceling Clone if it were in format. So this is going to be a pretty big loss. A lot of decks are going to feel the loss of Canceling Clone. A lot of decks are going to want Canceling Clone when they're playing up against Walls. And Walls, on the other hand, loves this being gone. I mean, it just makes the deck so much safer of choice. You don't really have to worry about people attacking for you nearly as much. Next, we have Capturing Aroma. Has mostly just been a Lugia card, but has been a decent search card in general. Won't be missed too much since we're also losing Lugia, and we have so many other search cards right now. But it has been a decent search card, and will be one option that you want to keep in mind that it's missing now. Damage Pump was mostly a Hisuian Zoroark V-Star card for spreading your damage around so that Hisuian V-Star could do more damage. There's a 50 times number of Pokemon in play with damage counters on them. Most recently, actually saw Day 2'd in some Gardevoir lists before we had Munkidori for math fixing to make it so that Drifloon could have 110 damage on it to do 330 into Charizard. With Munkidori, that has become pretty much obsolete, so Damage Pump really will not be missed at all. Dark Patch, of course, is going to be something that is hugely missed. Roaring Moon not having access to that, Ancient Box not having access to that. I think Roaring Moon basically just ceases to exist. I mean, both of those decks kind of cease to exist with the loss of Dark Patch and Radiant Greninja. Even though they still have Sada not having Dark Patch and Radiant Greninja. For Ancient Box, much more so than Radiant Greninja, you can definitely get by without Dark Patch and Ancient Box, but Roaring Moon, I don't think you can get by without Dark Patch, and certainly not without Radiant Greninja. So this is going to be a huge loss. Roaring Moon basically, I think, just falls off as a deck in general. And obviously any dark type decks that come out in the future will also be missing the dark patch. One of Energy Lotto, not really a card that we'll notice missing too much. Helps us find our special energy at times. It was mostly what it was used for, as a way to search out special energy off something like an Arvin or a Noctowl. With the rotation of double turbo energy anyways, this isn't likely to be very significant. But overall, definitely a card that, if more special energy get printed that we want to search out, it will be sad that we don't have Energy Lotto to have a little bit of extra consistency in those decks. If you have Featherball, I actually think this is a card that we're missing a lot more post-rotation, because this is really good in any deck with Noctowl and Pidgeot for being able to just Noctowl for Rare Candy Featherball. And those decks haven't been as good recently. I mean, Terapagos, Noctowl, Pidgeot, Dusknoir was using this, but it kind of fell off. Post-rotation, Fan Rotom decks are everywhere, Noctowl decks are everywhere, and it would make it a lot easier to fit Pidgeot into those builds if you could play Featherball with the Rare Candy. So this is going to be actually a pretty big, we're going to miss this quite a bit in my opinion. I've already, just in the last 24 hours, had someone want to play Featherball in a deck that we were building, and had to be like, oh, nope, we can't do that anymore. No free Pidgeot. So yeah, definitely going to be a card that is missed. And speaking of a ball card that is going to be missed, Hisuian Heavy Ball. This has been the card that I have missed the most already since rotation has hit. I think people really underestimate how much differently this allows you to build your decks. I mean, even a deck like Terra Box, obviously you're going to play two of your most important attackers anyways, but you play so many 1-ofs, and you don't want to really play it any other way. Your deck doesn't really function if you just play two of all your important Pokemon, because all of your Pokemon are pretty important. You have 7 different Pokemon for different situations. And usually when one of them's prized, you can find a way around it, but Hisuian Heavy Ball just makes that so much easier. Hisuian Heavy Ball gives you so much deck space, gives you so much more flexibility. This really took a lot of variance out of the game when it came to prizes. And I don't think that it's this is something that you can easily build around. The ticket does not substitute for Hisuian Heavy Ball at all. Hisuian Heavy Ball is much better in the early game, whereas ticket does not work as well in the early game, because you have to put more cards back into your prizes, which means you're more likely to prize something that you actually did need, still, even after the ticket. So, Hisuian Heavy Ball, I really don't think it's something we can replace. I don't think it's something we can easily build around. I think a lot of decks are either going to have to make their lists significantly more consistent. Walls lists, can't be as greedy on their walls, the counts of their basic walls Pokemon. And then a lot of lists like Terra Box, I think, are just going to have to suffer when they prize their Pikachu EX in a matchup where they really need it. They're just going to have to find other ways around it. And sometimes when you prize multiple important 1-ofs, that could be a much bigger issue. Next, we have Lost Vacuum. So obviously Lost Vacuum, a pretty big loss as well. All tools in stadiums, all tools at least, going pretty much unchecked now. There's not really an easy way to get rid of them. I mean, there's a new supporter that came out that would let you do it, but I mean, it's supporter. You really don't want to be doing that to just get rid of a tool most of the time. So Bravery Charms on Drifloons, Bravery Charms on anything, going mostly unchecked. You can tech stadiums into decks a lot more easily now without having to worry about your opponent making it an obsolete tech with Lost Vacuum, which was a concern in the past. I'm going to play this one tool, but then it just gets Lost Vacuum anyways. Why did I even play it? So now, even some ace specs like Hero's Cape or the Survival Brace are going to have a lot more value as ace specs as well, now knowing that they can't just be vacuumed away. So Lost Vacuum is going to be a huge loss, mostly for tools. Of course, the stadium out is nice as well, but basically all tool cards are so much stronger with the loss of Lost Vacuum. Mirage Gate is another piece of the Lost Zone package that will be missed. Switch card, not a card that's going to be missed a ton, but that extra heal definitely is very relevant into Dragapult. Can be relevant into Gardevoir. Definitely any deck that was easily able to just play switch cards over switches before is going to miss having switch card, but ultimately we will be able to just play other switching cards instead. Next, Trek and Choose, another card that I don't really, although has been really, really good, I don't really feel like we'll actually miss that much. Really just a way to make your deck thinner. There's usually going to be like good cards that you can play instead of Trek and Choose. We'll make some decks just a tad less consistent that might have wanted to have this option before, but really any deck can get away with not playing Trek and Choose. They basically just are ways to thin your deck, so. Collapse Stadium, a card that hasn't been seeing as much play lately, but will still be missed. I mean, it was a nice option for a long time, mostly just to get rid of your own liabilities. Without Lumineon or Rotom, we won't need to do that as much, but could still be nice to have around to get rid of something like Pheasantipity. Won't be an option, though. Also won't be an option as a Disruption card, which never was an amazing Disruption card, but it was always nice to be able to put your opponent to 4, especially against something like Area 0 decks. Next, we have Lost City. So this could be a pretty big loss. There's a lot of Lost City has been really good against Gardevoirs, really good against like Dusknoirs in the past, which are obviously still very good. Another card that has been seeing a ton of play lately, but it still finds its way into like Dragapult lists sometimes. Always finds its way into Iron Thorns. Walls would love to be playing this card to get rid of just like the few Pokemon that could actually deal with the walls themselves without having to worry about them getting recovered. So Lost City definitely a pretty significant loss, but not one that. Not one that's backbreaking. I think that we'll probably have some situations in the future where like walls would have been much harder to deal with if it had lost access to Lost City still. Now, Magma Basin's actually a huge loss. I think that obviously it hasn't been a dominant card in the game or anything, but it does make fire decks so much better. I mean, it's just a free energy on board for fire decks every single turn basically, and it has amazing synergy with Armarouge, and amazing synergy with like Gouging Fire with Munkidori. So both those decks are honestly probably dead without Magma Basin, at least for now. I know Armarouge has some hype with like Ho-EX in the next set, but right now I feel like the Magma Basin loss means that fire decks just are not really good right now. Pokestop, another big loss. I think that this definitely makes a lot of decks much less consistent. I mean, you can't really play Ancient Box without Pokestop. Goldengo is significantly worse without Pokestop, although still playable. Really is like any hyper-aggressive deck. I mean, Raging Bolt's going to miss Pokestop a lot for that early game consistency. A lot of decks that don't have Pokestop now are going to have to find other ways to substitute that in. Goldengo's usually playing like the Dunsparce now. Raging Bolt playing like the Noctowl engine now. And, I mean, it's not just the Pokestop rotation, but it's also the Greninja rotation in combination. Losing just 2 really good early game consistency cards is going to be a hit for a lot of decks. Nimble of Sinnoh, not a card we're really going to miss too much. Obviously, it would still be able to be used to shut off something like Mist Energy, but Special Energy just really are not all that. Post-rotation, there's some Luminous Energy popping around, but with the rotation of Lugia, Temple of Sinnoh is not really going to be missed too much. We still have Enhanced Hammer if we really need Special Energy hate. Emergency Jelly, another decent moon card. We don't really see outside of that. We saw it with like Articuno from Silver Tempest a long time ago, but really anytime recently has just been a moon card to heal your moon after using Frenzy Dojing. A card really won't be missed. I mean, Moon's already, like I said, is pretty much already dead without Dark Passion Reading Greninja and Pokestop. So Emergency Jelly, not a card that we're really going to notice being gone too much. Forest Hill Stone, on the other hand, like I've talked about, this is a crucial consistency card in most decks. Such a large portion of the format plays Forest Seal Stone plus any V. I mean, you'll just put a V and a Forest Seal Stone in your deck just to have Forest Seal Stone access, right? It's just like a free, in any deck that doesn't have like a better V-Star power, it's just a free search your deck for a card once per game, which is crazy. It's almost like playing an extra A-Spec. So yeah, I mean, Forest Seal Stone will obviously be massively missed. This will make a lot of decks a lot less consistent, especially in the early game. And for better or for worse, I mean, having Forest Seal Stone without Lost Vacuum, I think would be pretty unhealthy because you could like use it to prep for an Iono really consistently. But I think that not having this extra little early game consistency boost for every deck almost will definitely, to me, make the format a little bit worse by making every deck brick a little bit more often. So just similar to what I was saying about Lumineon and even Rotom to an extent. Panic Mask, so not a card we see all the time, but did have some day 2s, most recently with Archaludon EX and Dragapult, allowing you to set a Pokemon with only 40 HP or less, and then Panic Mask to protect the Pokemon that Panic Mask is attached to from getting knocked out. So an interesting card that was still seeing play up until very recently, here and there apparently, but not a card that I'm sure most people will even think about. Now, double turbo energy is a huge loss. There's so many attacks that can be used for 2 colorless energy, or even like cards that are going to be very relevant in post-creation still, like Ridge Raft and Milotic that now rely on Crispin, would love to be playing double turbo energy for quicker attacks. Iron Thorns is honestly pretty much irrelevant without this. The Cloth Pagos archetype is pretty much irrelevant without this. I mean, Pagos as an archetype on its own without... we will now have to play like Glass Trumpets, right, if that wants to be successful. So double turbo energy is going to be a huge loss. I mean, we really can't overstate enough how good double turbo energy is. I mean, even I was saying before, like just reducing your damage to 0 for Wellspring Mask, making the corner lock so much stronger, is another big loss to double turbo energy. For better or for worse, these double colorless effects have pretty much always been in format. When they're not, they're definitely a lot less. They're just decks that just don't exist because of it. And if we get another one in the future, there will most certainly be a bunch of decks that just sort of suddenly exist now, thanks to that single attachment for 2 colorless. So it'll be interesting. We will definitely miss double turbo energy. There'll definitely be a lot of decks that are just going to die without double turbo energy. There'll be a lot of decks that you want to play, maybe a couple copies of double turbo energy in going forward that you just will have to get by not playing. Next we have Gift Energy, an okay card. Really, I mean, obviously has been mostly seen to play in Lugia since you have Archeops, and it's not something that we're going to miss a ton because of that. I mean, it's really mostly an Archeops card, but was still like a decent option. I mean, there were like some future lists that played it at one point because you could use it for some of the colorless costs and then get that extra draw at the end of the turn. But especially with like Dragapult around, being able to Phantom Dive to play around Gift Energy, or like a Dreadabrain getting around Gift Energy. Really has mostly just been a Lugia card, and I think we won't really miss Gift Energy too much. Beard Energy, of course, another energy that we're just not really going to miss. Another card that, you know, has already mostly been phased out of the format, and when it is good, it's only just for doing that 30 less damage. Taking 30 less damage from V Pokemon, which are all rotating, so obviously we will not particularly miss the V-Guard energy. Now, that is all of the most relevant cards in the format that are leaving here. I wanted to touch on just sort of a quick top 10 of what I think the most impactful cards leave the format are. Obviously, I've already talked about all of these here, but my top 10 is going to be Irida. I think that, you know, this is just such a huge hit to any water deck. I mean, even just... has just been an incredibly powerful consistency card in general, and any deck that just plays water Pokemon. Just being able to search a deck for an item is really good, and then same with Arven, right? Like, you grab a tool, but it's like, you're really just playing to search for an item, and then the extra card is a big bonus depending on what you were playing. So Irida is going to be a huge hit to consistency for a lot of decks, and will definitely be missed. And then, of course, Comfey, this sort of rich representative of the Lost Box engine in general. You know, obviously, a lot of people's favorite decks, a deck that I had got, like, a vast majority of my points with last season, is some sort of Lost Zone variants. And, you know, I will miss playing Lost Box as much as anybody else. Lugia, like I said, you know, this has been a ridiculously dominant deck since its release, and has been never really counted out. I think that as long as Lugia Archeops is in format, it would always have had a place in the format. It's always been good to some degree in some build. People would have found a way to make it work. So honestly, I'm glad that it's finally gone. I'm glad we don't... I've played against Lugia for far too long now, but that's my number 7. That's that's my number 8. Pretty big loss. Number 7 would be Metafy. So now we're getting the cards that are just sort of like staples. Metafy, not quite played in everything, not quite always played, but we will miss this a ton, especially with Wellspring Mask, Ogerpon EX being so dominant in the format, and really any other bench snipers come out, and this is not having a bench barrier is going to be felt pretty hugely, as long as that is the case. And even once Shaman comes out, not being able to anybody pop him for it is still going to be really, really huge, and make, you know, decks a lot worse against things like Wellspring Mask, Ogerpon EX. So, Metafy, one of the best bench barrier cards that, or most used bench barrier cards we've ever had. Will definitely be hugely missed. For number 6, we got Rotom V. Just a crucial consistency card for a lot of decks, especially with the Forest Seal Stone combo. Has just been one of my favorite cards of ever since people started playing it. I mean, even saw play in Miraidon towards the tail end of Prismatic Evolutions format. This is the card that most people have announced discharge quite a few times at this point. Radiant Greninja, number 5. This is just such a powerful attack. A lot of decks will be very happy to be safe from this. But a lot of decks will also be very sad to lose concealed cards. I just think it's like crazy just how many decks concealed cards single-handedly made like at least like 20% better. Just because of the amount of consistency it provides to be able to just once per turn discard an energy, draw 2. There's so many decks that want to get energy in this card pile, and there's so many decks that need that extra draw 2 a turn. I mean, just drawing 2 cards every turn is really, really good. And then, of course, Moonlight Shuriken being an insanely good attack just ties it all together. Number 4, Forest Seal Stone. Just like I said, this is all 3 of these top 4 cards are all cards that I think are going to make the format worse to not have. I think they're just to make the format more bricky. They're going to make things go down to variants more often. And Forest Seal Stone is definitely one of those cards where it just feels like it's really nice that it was really nice that a lot of decks had a V-Star option, and then ones that didn't could just sort of play this almost extra ace-spec and just search the deck for a card once per game, make their deck significantly more consistent. Stage 2 decks felt a lot better because of this card is existing. The Arven Rotom Stone engine, to me, is a really cool and balanced engine, and a really cool way to make Stage 2 decks good. I think that for the Forest Seal Stone, Rotom, and other cards that we're going to talk about here are going to be huge loss for consistency, and personally, I'm going to be really sad to see them gone, and already am from my testing so far. Number 3, Double Turbo Energy. Not a card I necessarily care to that it is gone, but there are a lot of decks that play Double Turbo Energy tend to be pretty fun. So I will miss things like Cloth, which I've really liked ever since it became a viable deck. I really liked playing Trap Ghost as well. I really miss playing some of these aggressive DTE decks. I won't miss my Miraidon opponent, just getting to just DT to an Iron Hands to get an easy turn 1 amp, but I will miss a lot of the creativity and the deck diversity that Double Turbo Energy brings, whether for better or for worse. So in Heavy Ball, like I mentioned, this is like the card that I've missed most already post-rotation. This is my number 2. I think that it just makes everything so much smoother. It makes you have to worry so much less. It makes so much decks so much better. It makes the game feel more fun. It makes me feel like I can play more different attackers in my deck. I don't have to and that I can do so without, I can play Terrabox with 7 different 1-ofs and then just like have access to whichever ones I need every game. I just have way more control over the way my games go. We'll make do without it, but it definitely feels like it makes this, to me, also like decreases deck consistency overall, because if you're playing more copies of your basic one to get around not having Heavy Ball, then you're playing less copies of general consistency cards most likely. This means you are going to brick a little bit more. And lastly, at number 1, I think Lumineon is the biggest loss to rotation. I think that so many decks are so reliant on Luminous Sign. I think that it gives you consistency at every stage of the game, right? I mean, that's the thing with all of these search your deck for supporter abilities. They're great turn 1, they're great turn 2, they're great turn 3. I mean, you want to play support every turn, you want to play the right support every turn. And you can no longer do that anywhere near as consistency without Lumineon. I have been take it or leave it on the ability to easily access supporters during my time with the game. I think that something like VS Seeker was always a little bit too overpowered. I think that something like Tapu Lele GX was also a little bit overpowered, but I think that Lumineon was a very balanced card. And whether I am... It's definitely not... I think I still miss Heavy Ball more, but I think that Lumineon is the big impactful loss of this rotation. This is going to be the one that you feel the most on a game, on every single game that you play. That's all I have for you today, though. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you are going to miss most of the cards that have rotated in the comments below. If you want to check out any of my other content or my socials, obviously you can check out my YouTube channel, and there is... my link tree is linked in the description below with links to my coaching, all of my social media, my Twitch stream, stuff like that. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.